Hello, my name is Rose, and we are the former owners of 19185 Southeast Homewood. Um, I don't know what your gardening intentions are going to be, but I just thought I'd give you a little video of what is still here, just so that you know what you've got and you can decide if you want to keep it or not. So here we just mostly have the Eureka palms, so I try and trim these probably about 3 or 4 times a year just so that they stay thin and try and keep them off the house. There are a few fronds that are up there touching, so those could probably be trimmed. It's not a big deal if they touch the roof, but it's just ideal to keep everything completely off the roof, so we usually just go up there and trim things or trim from the bottom when we can reach the ends there. It should be pretty easy. This little guy, I don't remember what he's called, but I just kind of plopped him down here into the base of these tree trunks. You'd be surprised what grows out here really well that way. You can usually tie orchids here, for example, with a little bit of pantyhose to the sides of these palms, and they grow really well out here. So it looks like that's what I did with this plant, and it's obviously been flourishing and growing well. It'll probably keep growing up and through these trees here. These guys are white bird of paradise. So unlike the little short orange ones, these guys get really tall. These also need to get thinned out several times a year. I mean, you could probably chop them all down and then they'll grow back up again a lot shorter. So, whatever. These are all just pineapple tops that I twist off the pineapples from the grocery store. Some of the pineapples in the yard are tops that came off of Maui gold pineapples from Hawaii, where my parents live, so they should make really delicious, juicy pineapples when they do fruit. Usually takes about 2 years to make fruit after you stick it in the ground. If that's something you ever want to do and you're having trouble, let me know. I got a pretty foolproof way to have them root and be able to do well outside. And obviously they're just mostly in the sand. I just toss a little handful of dirt into a shallow hole and they grow pretty well through that. This is what remains of a really delicious purple dragon fruit plant that I had here. They took it out and gave it away, but there's some little scraps left. You'll see some here. And then if you come over here to this little area, I had some pieces that had broken off that I just kind of tossed on the rocks that are still surviving. So you can just let it grow as it wants to out here, and then you may have it grow well enough in the next year or two to make fruit. Oh gosh, it's probably the best dragon fruit I've ever had. Super sugary, super juicy, really delicious. All these little stubby palm trees here, like this one, are made from pineapple or coconuts that I found washed up on the beach. So just a couple miles away from here is the Coral Cove Beach on Jupiter Island. Beautiful place to go walking in the morning or really any time. And if you get a coconut that's already been soaked and washed up by the ocean, you can just set it there halfway in the ground, and within a couple months it'll start to sprout a tree. So all these little guys around here, that's probably the strongest one, but all these other guys too are just from abandoned coconuts. So at some point in the next 10 years, you'll get some big coconut palms if you let them keep growing. And then over here, these little guys, this one and that one, these are key lime bushes. So when they make fruit, it's so delicious. Just you can smell the lime when you pick them off of these little bushes. They're really small. They probably only grow to be about that big, but once they turn green and they smell really fragrant, you can pull them off and they're very tasty. This, you'll see I've got probably, I think, 3 of these bushes, these yellow flowers, is Thyralis. The bees and butterflies really like these plants, so they flower really most of the year. It's not often that they don't have a lot of flowers on them. The flowers here is a dwarf poinciana. So I love the huge poinciana trees, but they just get so big. So these are more bush-like or kind of mini trees. They only get to be probably 10 or 12 feet tall if you let them get that big. The only downside is they've got some thorns. So even though the flowers are really beautiful and the bees and butterflies love them, they are a bit thorny. So I'll let you decide how you feel about that. This is the other Thyralis that I have over here. And then just peeking up from this corner, I'll just show you from this direction. This is the tip here and there of a Florida peach tree. So that'll usually bloom about once a year, and probably is getting into the time that might be able to start making some peaches soon. Tucked around here, I've got some little hibiscus flowers here and there. They don't do as well on this side, so I haven't really tried to get a lot of them. You've got these firecracker flowers. These grow really well. They make a ton of flowers, as you can see, and the bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds really love these plants. So that's what I have there. This is a weed tree, so they keep trying to come back over and over again. I'm always pulling them out, so you probably want to do the same because they get big pretty fast. Oh, and look, there is a nest that I didn't see up here. So this is the upside of having thorny plants, is it's very good protection for birdies. So I bet that could be from the cardinal family that we have living in our yard. I've kind of wondered where they've been. So that's neat. All right. And then this little tree, I have another one in a pot in the back by the shed. Honestly, I cannot for the life of me remember what this is called. I think it is an East Asian flowering tree of some sort. It makes these nice little bell flowers. Again, this is one that bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds really like, and the flowers are pretty. This here is a native flowering tree called an orange Geiger. It also doesn't get super giant, but it makes these nice little flowers in here that are pretty. So when you see clusters like this guy, you know it's going to turn into a bunch of flowers here pretty soon. So that's most of the stuff on this side. We'll move around here around the rest of the house. This is a kind of fern that you can buy at the store intentionally, but I'm not a huge fan of it, even though it's kind of fluffy and nice looking. It's got thorns, so it's not fun to grab with your gardening gloves, and it roots really deeply and spreads wide. So you can let it spread if you want to, but I've been trying to keep it relatively under control because I'm not a big fan of thorny things most of the time. And this corner here where the pineapples are, I've tried to plant a bunch of different things here. This is kind of what I consider our little desert zone. It gets the most direct sun from the south end all year. and so you need plants that really don't mind being in absolutely full sun. Also is mostly sandy here and just tends to be dry on this side of the house. So that's why my dragon fruit cactus and these pineapples do really well, because they can do really well when there isn't a whole lot of water and when there's lots and lots of sun. But hibiscus, we even had trouble with honeysuckle. We had finally one that was growing really well and flowering, but they pulled that one out for you. All right, so in the front here, most of what's left is on the neighbor's side. So this big sea grape tree and anything kind of at the base of that tree, that's all on their side of the property. This cement edging that's down there, that kind of marks the edge of our property to theirs. I dumped several hundred pounds of Miracle Grow soil here just to help make this better, because it was just sand and gravel before. And we had some really nice muscadine grapes that were growing on the trellis. They're super, super sweet. So if you were to ever want to go grapes down here, the muscadine variety is probably the best and one of the only that's going to grow well down here in this climate. And you can just train it on these little trellis pieces coming along here, or you can put flowers like we had before. Or if you decide you hate it and just want to take it out, it should be easy just to pull out the wood pieces. We didn't sink it with any concrete or anything. It makes it easy to adjust later or pull out if you need to. And more pineapples. And these plumeria trees are pretty young. As you can see, they're pretty small, but it shouldn't be long before they're starting to make flowers, and they're growing well. These flowers are called pagoda flowers, just because when they're in the peak of flowering, right now they're kind of done and getting ready to need to be trimmed. They're in the shape of a pagoda. These are other ones that the bees and butterflies really like a lot. And they've been growing pretty well in this little corner. It looks like there might be another little one growing just right down there. This guy, this umbrella tree, is a weed. They keep coming up all over the place. Our neighbors have one, so we get all their little seeds kind of drifting over into our yard, trying to make new umbrella trees. So you can take it or leave it, but you can probably see when you look closer that I've trimmed it down several times and it keeps coming back. Some of these little individual guys here are these heliconia, so they're going to make these nice flowers. Once a heliconia stalk has flowered, so like once this guy has made a flower, this flower will last a pretty long time, but when it finally dies, it'll kind of dry up and it'll just be like a dead little stick in the middle right there. So when that happens, it's never going to flower again. So that's when I just come down to the bottom and then I just trim it down to the bottom. And this is a plant that spreads underground through the roots, which is why there's some of those still poking up over there. So it'll come back. So you could trim this whole thing down and they'll come on back up for you if you want them to. This was a big mulberry tree that makes buckets of mulberries probably 2 to 3 times a year. It looks like it's already getting some new little shoots. So if you're up for some delicious, very sweet black mulberries, maybe you can keep this trimmed down as a bush instead of a big tree. And then this is our strangler fig tree. It came with the house and seemed way too big for us to remove. So we've just kept it relatively contained. Every year we have a tree guy come over from Only Trees, and they cut it down really short, usually before hurricane season. If you come and look closer, you might see there's a palm tree up there. So this fig is swallowing up that palm tree. And then I've just got some of, again, this vine that I just tucked into these roots that's growing quite vigorously in there. And then I had a couple of these little things here. Right now the roots have essentially trapped it in there, so you get to keep this little birdhouse that I put in there. And then just some other little silvery shade plants that I've got tucked back there growing well. We've got these yucca trees here that I have the tree guys trim every year. They make some lovely white flowers. We've got these snake plants down here also. The snake plants also spread underground, so trim what you don't want because it'll come back for you. And it also makes some nice white flowers every now and then. This is a rogue papaya tree, so I'll kind of stir this up for you down here a little bit. I took my compost bin away, but this is probably the richest square of soil in the whole yard. I compost back here and use it in the vegetable garden beds or wherever I need it, especially by the bananas. And this papaya tree is probably growing from a seed that we just tossed into the compost bin a long time ago, and then managed to grow up into this tree. So hopefully it will be as tasty as whatever papaya we ended up eating to put it there. And if you hate it, just cut it down. But these little guys here are little flower buds. So it won't be long before this is starting to make flowers. And when you see flowers, it won't be long before you have little baby papayas. This is a butterfly weed here. This is something that spreads and grows all over the yard. So it's a weed, but I've been planting them, transplanting them around the yard from the yard just for the butterflies because they super love it. And then this is just that other little tree I told you about that had those bell flowers. I can't remember what it's called. This is just the one that's in a pot here. Let's see. This is our mango tree. Delicious, delicious mangoes. It makes a lot of fruit usually every other year. So we had a bunch of mangoes last year. So this year it's taken a break. I think it only made like 2 or 3 mangoes. And then next year should be the year that it makes a bunch more, especially if it's not too dry and you give it a little fertilizer during the year. We have the only tree guys come and trim it low and long. So we're trying to keep it under that first power line for the most part. And we just want it low so that we can reach all the mangoes because this tree can get tall and we'd rather keep it low and easy to reach. And underneath we have a bunch of these bromeliads. These grow easily. They grow in the sand and the gravel. All they need is water pitching in from the top here to help keep them alive. I don't really have to do much to them, and they spread very easily. So if you know anything about bromeliads, you probably know how to take care of them and how to split them and weed them out. If you don't, kind of like the heliconia, once they've made this dramatic flower, then that particular part of the plant will never make a flower again. But they do make something called pups. So what I'm going to do is see if I can come around to a bromeliad that clearly is not going to flower again. Okay, here's one. So here's one that had a flower and now it's all dried up or drying up. So this little one right here is never going to flower again. So what we would do is just cut or pull that out. But all of these have these little sprouts coming off the bottom, and those little sprouts are called pups. So when one of them has made the flower, you just cut that one out, you leave the pup there, and the pup will keep growing, and then the pup will keep making pups. So when you buy one bromeliad, you never have to buy another one again because they just keep growing. Here I left these containers for you. They are full of a lot of succulents. These succulents like to spread very easily. But I also have these nice flowering climbing vines that are pretty young. They've maybe been here for about 6 months. So if you let them keep growing, they'll grow over this trellis. And likewise, there's a different one on this other side, also growing up like that. We've got philodendron in here with these nice big leaves. This guy is a little wonderful pomegranate tree. You can probably move it somewhere else to let it grow bigger and faster. It's kind of scrawny looking right now. We've got this nice staghorn fern. I mean, stuff loves to grow on this mango tree. You've got the staghorn, you've got that vine. We have this palm tree that I've cut down probably 10 times. It keeps coming back. It's just rooted right there in the base of this tree. So most of what's down here are these bromeliads that you can just kind of weed through here. And then these little purple plants make some nice purple flowers sometimes. Our realtors left all of this yard stuff here, so you can make other garden beds, or you can arrange the trim or edge pieces however you want. We've used this little flat area as a hammock zone. These garden beds I've had as vegetable garden beds. They used to be cedar, but after 3 years the wood had basically disintegrated. So I replaced it with the cinder block, and this is actually, I believe, 3 layers of cinder block. So there's yet another one deeper in there. And in the middle, I filled it completely with Miracle-Gro soil. Kind of a mix of the potting soil mix and the actual like green bag soil. So right now things are very weedy. It's been awful at work, which is why I'm getting another job. So I haven't had any time to enjoy the garden. But things that I can tell you that are not weeds are muscadine grape. So that's this guy right here. That's that little trunk that's right there. So if you let them grow in around here, then you could end up with some very delicious sweet grapes in the next couple of years. These little red flowers right there, those are pentas, and butterflies really like those a lot. These are weeds, these Spanish needles, those guys, but I've let them grow in contained places like the garden beds, just because it's one of the number one pollinators for honeybees in Florida. They definitely love them. So I've tried to compromise between being annoyed by the seeds and letting them actually grow. This is another Florida native wildflower that I let sometimes grow in the garden beds because the pollinators like them. This is a passion flower vine coming across here. It looks a little raggedy because we've got butterflies that have their little caterpillars that like to nibble on them. So the zebra longwing and the Gulf fritillary butterflies like passion fruit and passion flower vines. So every once in a while you might see little caterpillars on those vines. If I see one, I'll show you what it looks like. I'll also give you a link to a little blog post I have about butterfly raising, if you at all would be interested. Along those lines, this is milkweed, and that's for the monarch butterflies. Let's see, some more of those red penta flowers down in the corner. This is another grapevine right there. And those are probably most of what you would need to know here. We've got a couple of very sweet papaya trees here. Looks like they could stand to be fertilized, but are still hanging in there. Likewise, these banana trees, these are ice cream bananas or blue java. They're supposed to have a very sweet vanilla flavor, and they do. They are sweet. They're small bananas. They probably only grow to be about half the size of normal bananas. Bananas need a lot of water, and they need lots of compost and fertilizer. And you can see the pineapples have done well with that plant too. This one is growing to be pretty big. This is, I think, one of the Maui Gold ones that should have a really sweet, delicious flavor when it makes a pineapple. This right here is a cassia bush, and this is it makes these beautiful yellow flowers, but is also a host plant for yellow sulfur butterflies. There's a little butterfly coming by. We usually have about 10 to 20 butterflies flying around at any given time in here. Speaking of butterflies, these are caterpillars here for the swallowtail butterfly, and they munch on these Dutchman's pipe vines. This is mixed in with something called a Jamaican cherry or Jamaican strawberry tree. So it makes these little red berries. We call it a crunch berry tree because it tastes like crunch berry cereal. You're probably too young to know what that is, but it is tasty. And so you'll see this is getting ready to make lots of them. I've got tons of these little green guys on here. That's all going to turn into these super sweet, delicious little red tropical berries. So you can, again, take it or leave it, but it is delicious. It's in that pot down there. I'm trying to contain its size a little bit. And I have it kind of wrapped up with this trellis just so it stays tall and you can walk under it pretty well. Again, take it or leave it. You can just rip it all out if you want to. So there's more of that thyrallus flower. This hibiscus, we had this lovely woman living with us for a few months when she was in a tough time. And when she was able to move out, she gave us this really nice hibiscus bush that makes these huge, beautiful flowers, big red flowers. So that's just the little story behind that plant, should you keep it and want to know about it. This plant right here is orange honeysuckle. It has grown tremendously well. So all of this plant you see in this whole little island is all from the same plant. And it's just been a very sturdy grower. So another one the bees and butterflies really love. Oh, here's another, more of those caterpillars that are going to turn into those big swallowtail butterflies. Let's see, we've got another firecracker plant in here. Mixed in, we've got this yellow elder. So this also has grown very well. Pollinators really like those flowers also. You'll see more of it up there. Let's see. This is part of a flame vine that you probably won't see yet because it doesn't look like it has flowers on it, but it makes these big orange trumpety flowers. We've got lots of little lizards who have gotten to know us and don't care when we're standing right next to them. They're very nice. They won't hurt you. This plant right up here is a sapphire showers or sapphire tears, so it makes these pretty little purple flowers. Looks like there's still just one peeking out there, but you're about to have a whole bunch of them. Big clusters of those yellow elder flowers right there. These areca palms were planted here before we moved in. And they're pretty close to the house, closer than they should be. And they've just never done as well as the others, so I would recommend removing them. But this is another one that things have just grown on very well over time. Let's see. This guy right here, this hose, connects to an irrigation system. So some of that irrigation is in this tangle of plants that's in here in between these two guys. Oh, and I should show you, this is the Dutchman's pipe, the plant that those caterpillars really like, makes these flowers. And when you open it up, when it usually opens on its own when it's more mature, it's gonna kind of look like this on the inside. So they're kind of fancy, funky looking flowers. Anyway, so there's some irrigation bits in there, but also coming up here for these raised bed gardens. So it's just little drip lines that come down along the length, and it's all connected here. Here's a Gulf fritillary butterfly coming to find a place to lay some eggs here. So all of these have that drip irrigation across here, and I also have that drip irrigation in that little side piece of garden that is over here on the county line side. I'll just kind of dip my phone up and over so you can see. So in there I also have that drip irrigation that you can connect to the hose that's over there on that back corner of the house. Back in here we've got these little, gosh, I forget what they're called. Let me come around and show you what the flowers are gonna look like. So those little flowers there that the pollinators like a bit. And that's where that peach tree is, in that back corner also. These ferns spread pretty well, so if you hate them, pull them out. Otherwise they'll fill in whatever you would want to fill in with ferns. This fire pit should be probably about 4 of these blocks deep. We used to have just a metal bowl, but it rusted out after the first year, and then we've had this for the last 5.5 years, really is a very good, neat and tidy fireplace. So feel free to keep using that if you want. These rebar pieces, somebody had left us some long rebar, and I used it for vertical gardening. So one of the websites I send you can show a picture of it, but basically I stack pots on that rebar and then fill those pots full of dirt, kind of keep them all one pointed that way, one pointed that way, so that they're not right on top of each other. And then I plant herbs and flowers in those, so it's just a nice way to get some vertical gardening space in here. So if you ever do want to take it out, honestly, I pounded these in probably about 4 feet because I wanted to make them hurricane proof. So you might be best served to just maybe dig a hole like this and then cut it off lower down. But up to you. If you want to use it for gardening, you can, and then if you don't want to, then that might be the easiest way to take it out. Yeah, so you can see we've got the butterflies in here, and as the sun is coming up, right now it's pretty early, but when we get full sun in here, you'll see just a whole bunch of butterflies just swirling around all over the yard. We usually get these orange fritillaries, we get these swallowtails like that guy there, we get monarchs, orange sulfur, zebra longwings, and then a bunch of smaller varieties here and there. So I'll send you a little information about that too. Let's see. I can tell you that things grown right on the fence back there. So I had some passion fruit vines that were growing on the fence. They just don't do as well because I think the fence blocks some of the sun. The sun is always coming from that direction. So that's south. In the summertime, it's going to be kind of about there. So that's probably when it gets the most sun coming down at the right angle. But as you get into fall and winter, it's down far enough that it probably just blocks it too much. So you'll get to know the yard and get to know where is sunny, where is shady, and what does well where over time. I'll tell you, flowers usually do not grow well at the base of these big palm trees because the roots are so very dense, and there might be something chemically going on there too. So like this Dutchman's pipe, I elevated. You might see I've got a stack of bricks in there, and then I filled that stack full of dirt and I planted it in that instead of actually trying to dig into the roots. And that's the case for a lot of things that I try around the palm trees. So just telling you ahead of time so you don't buy a bunch of plants and have them die not doing well at the foot of the palm trees. You might have to do creative gardening around those. What else can I tell you? Our yard is usually pretty well protected on windy days. So when we've got hurricanes coming through, you'll see the tops of the trees just blowing like crazy. But when you look down at this level, really there's hardly any wind blowing. I think we've got some protection from the fence. Our neighbors on the other side have a concrete wall as tall as this fence around their pool, so that's also quite sturdy. Probably the worst hurricane we've had in the last 6.5 years. Really the only thing we had was just a little bit of leaning of that part of the fence that we just pushed back upright again and replaced a couple of those posts. So we have been very fortunate. The water accumulation, we really don't get any. So every once in a while, down on Old Dixie Road, it might flood enough for you to not get by in the car. In the last 6.5 years, I think that's happened to me twice, and it's only transient, just lasts for like a couple hours. So I just stop at a bar and get something to drink or a snack, and by the time I'm done, then the water's receded and I'm able to come up. So it's very rare, but on those days it's high and dry over here. We've got neighbors across the street who have lived here for over 20 years, even before we had a drainage reservoir system at the end of the street, and they said that this end has never flooded, so hopefully that'll be the same for you. Sometimes if it really downpours, you might have like an inch of water accumulate here on the patio while it's raining. Never anywhere close to getting up to the edge of the windows, and really, again, so transient. I mean, it's gone before you even know what happened, and very rare. So I'd say just a handful of times that might have ever happened. Most of these trees up here, I think, belong to our neighbors on the other side. They haven't really trimmed it much, but they probably should soon, since it's really getting tall and into those power lines. But we just haven't rocked the boat to ask them about that. We've just kind of let it go for now. Gosh, I'm not sure what else to tell you other than we've got lots of little yard critters that have become very comfortable in our home. I have never used pesticides. Really, I've almost never used fertilizer, probably twice in the last 6.5 years that I've been here. With the no pesticides, we don't really get any gross bugs in the house. We've had a termite contract and someone who comes through to treat the inside of the house a couple times a year. So, gosh, I can think maybe twice in the whole time I've lived here have I ever seen a cockroach in the house. So it's been pretty good. Up there, you'll see there's where are you up there? There you are. A little woodpecker. He never pecks on our house, but does like to come down sometimes onto this palm tree. And if you have the bird feeder out, they will be on the bird feeder. In fact, he's probably looking at me wondering why I don't have the bird feeder out right now. Up there is a family of starlings. They have lived here for as long as I have lived here. And they live in this little wood post here. That's one of the old electric poles. They've since changed everything over to these new concrete poles, but they left this one here because it's got the little starling house in it that they've lived on for ages and ages. So you'll see them out in the morning just chit-chatting with all the other birds. We've got a mockingbird family that sits up here on these power lines and will sing to you in the mornings. We've got a cardinal family that I think is for that nest that I showed you in that little thorny bush. And they too have been here for ages, and they are very comfortable with us, so they don't mind coming just to sit 10 feet away from us while we're sitting out on the patio. And they definitely, I think, are asking for food in the bird feeder sometimes, so you'll be good buddies with all of them if you feed them. There's a couple different kinds of dove families that hang out here too, and we've got what we call the yard bunny that I think has lived underneath the shed that we'll see coming out in the mornings every now and then. And then, you know, don't be scared of them. These little curly-tailed lizards that you see, we've got a couple of bigger ones. They're just like friendly little puppies. They're very sweet. They won't hurt you. They'll probably run away if you tried to come get them. But they're also comfortable enough with us. They just sit out and watch us garden or hang out in the yard. So in terms of our friendly yard pals, that's what you can expect. We've seen a couple of black racer snakes. They are nice snakes. I've never once seen a poisonous or a bad snake in our yard. Just if you're scared of snakes, just try and remember they're good and they chase the rats away. So I'd say that's maybe the only thing that I've seen that might be scary to other people. So I hope that that's helpful to you, or if any of that's interesting. If it isn't, don't worry, I won't take it personally. If you do have any questions for me, always feel free to reach out. I'll do my best to answer what I can about anything. We're honestly excited to have someone who sounds like they might be excited to live in this house. My husband and I have loved it here. We're very sad to leave. Sorry. So, we hope you love it as much as we have. Thank you, and have a great day.